Welcome to the Seeds of Wisdom series. Disclaimer: the Seeds of Wisdom digs into some deep subject matter. In order to plant a seed, we have to dig in the dirt. That's how we grow. If any of the subject matter feels like too much, it is important to seek your own mental health support. I did, and it's why I'm able to be here doing this today. Hello and welcome to episode 15 of Seeds of Wisdom, brought to you by From a Loving Place with author Rachel Wolf. I'm Rachel Wolf, and today I'm so excited to have Jodie Eckleberry-Hunt, Ph.D, ABPP, and I'll let you explain what those are, here today with us because we're talking about a seed that's very close to my heart, which is owning my story. And I couldn't think of a better person to have on to share this seed, because I just have been reading her brand new book that's coming out on February 14th. And it's called Badass Stories, Grit, Growth, Hope, and Healing in the Show. So please help me welcome her, and I will let her Jodie introduce herself because she has so many things to offer. I don't want to miss anything. So Jodie, introduce yourself for us. Thank you.
So I am, the ABPP is essentially indicating I'm board certified in health psychology, which basically means I'm your average psychologist, but I have extra training in adjustment to chronic diseases, weight loss, sleep, chronic pain, that sort of thing. I've been in practice for a long time. And I also am very, very open and will throw out the front end. I have generalized anxiety disorder. So I understand not only how to treat mental health challenges, but I have a little bit of my own. And as I explain in Badass Stories, my own anxiety got in the way of me writing for a long time. So that is part of my owning my story. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, I have to say, so I'm a highlighter. So I was highlighting the book, and I think I told you I couldn't even get through the introduction without highlighting. I mean, that's a little unusual for me. I love my highlighter, but it usually doesn't start till we're getting into the meat of the book. And I couldn't believe how much was even just in the introduction.
So I had a good hook.
Yes, you had a
Thank
very
you.
good hook. It got me instantly. So I want to ask you, what does owning my story mean to you?
Well, as I do talk about in the introduction, I've written a few books, but this one is probably the most personal, and it's probably, I would say, the one I've wanted to write the most and for the longest. But I'm a big fan of Rachel Naomi Remen, and the reason I didn't write this book is I wanted to be like her, and that she's not me. And so part of me, I often describe myself currently as I've grown into myself. And that is another way of saying I have owned my own story, that my story isn't like other people's. My books aren't like other people's books, and that's okay. So, owning my own story is sort of making space for my own truth, my own reality as valid and different and okay compared to other people. I guess that would be it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I have such a connection to that, because that was important for me too. Is I had to own my own story, whereas I used to try to have those romantic relationships that everybody else had,
Yes.
and I didn't realize how much I sabotage
Yes.
my actual relationships because of trying to pretend I was somebody that I wasn't, because I wasn't the person in those stories. So, looking at other people's lives in that way, I, that was a big part of me figuring out, oh, this is why things don't work.
That measuring stick, right?
Yes.
But sometimes our lives aren't measured in the same unit of measurement as other people. So it's just sort of figuring all that out. But I think it takes a while. It just takes a bit of life experience to figure that out.
Well, one of the things I love so much about your book was that you tell stories from this human perspective where you can actually see the humans involved. You can see the feelings that can be similar. You can see how we can be different. I could see my own judgments when I was judging, and the way you presented it, it really helped to see the stories, to see that part.
Well, thank you. That really means a lot to me. It was challenging. I've been in practice. I graduated my fellowship in 2002, so I've been in practice for a long time. As you can imagine, it was hard to decide which stories to tell. But I guess what I want to really put out there is what I have found to be really healing is that people can share their vulnerabilities and their stories in an accepting environment. Uh, and there are themes that I've heard over and over. And I tried in the stories I chose to pick themes that I thought would resonate with other people because I think what is really healing is knowing you're not alone. And I think that it's the isolation that we create and this not good enough and the shame and the judgment that sort of gets in the way of us moving forward. And that's why I chose the stories. They're every day. And I guess I also want to say the older I get, I realize that it is the everyday that's awesome. It's not these life-changing, stories that really sound good in a book, but we can't relate to. It's really the everyday stuff that is life altering and is pretty awesome.
Yeah. One of the things that I had to disconnect for myself was the whole process of letting go of happily ever after and just being in happily now. Because anytime I went to the future, I was looking for something else, so I couldn't experience the full moment of where I was. And that's what one of those things I had really realized with like my that over romanticized version of like looking at how things should be.
100%. And again, I think that gets in the way of moving forward. And that's another thing that may be disappointing or eye opening, I guess, for folks who read my book is not all the stories wrap up. Uh, there are cliffhangers, I guess. And that's a really hard part of my job is sort of accepting you don't get to this neat ending with people. It's just to be continued. And that's great. That's what life is. If you find yourself in a good spot, enjoy it. It's not going to last. If you find yourself in a bad spot, take heart. It's not going to last. Things are always changing.
Oh, such an important point because yes, and it's funny because I don't understand quite where that the tiger can't or changes stripes stuff when it comes to people changing. It's like, no, people can change, but they have to want to change to change. That's the point, you know, and but everything's constantly changing. It's not nobody stays the same. Even if they wanted to stay the same, they couldn't stay exactly the same because of their experiences.
Right. And change takes a lot of discipline,
Yeah.
which in the end, I have said before, I think it takes a lot of badass to walk in my door. As I tell people, like, okay, you're guaranteed pain. Just taking the step to walk in the door and say, I have a problem. And that's the first step, but um, that takes a lot of courage. So when you're talking about change, it's not even wanting, it's having the courage to say, something needs to change and I'm part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, that I keep going back to your book. It had so much good stuff in it. It but I love that when you're talking about that very thing, how the bravery it takes about feeling. You talk a lot about feeling in your book and feeling pain and being with somebody feeling their pain. and it's okay to feel their pain and not stopping them from that. Will you go a little bit into that aspect? Because I know when we're telling ourselves our stories, sometimes we try to have a story without the feelings, without the bad things happen, without the challenging things happening in our life, so that we can just go scoot right over them. But how important is it to be in and experience our feelings before allowing ourselves to move past?
Yeah, and that's the disappointing thing about seeing me is, people are looking to escape pain, and I have to re-explain to them, we gotta sit with it for a little while, learning to tolerate it and figuring out what is it trying to tell us. Because I usually tell people, if you don't deal with it now, it's just gonna come back. Um, by the way, life is you can't escape life without pain, but it you want to at least learn the lesson that's in front of you. So then the pain that's served up next, you want to make sure it's not just the one that you just lived through not that long ago. Uh, so that's a tough one to hear, and I guess people have to test me, but that's the only way to come out on the other end. And as far as the work that I do, that's really something. I'm a fixer by nature, and most people do have an element of wanting to help. And we think that helping is extinguishing somebody's pain or fixing somebody's pain. But in the end, it's not. And I believe one of the most valuable things I can do is witness somebody's pain with them, like walk the journey with them and point, like, let's look over there and let's check this out, but saying, I'm with you, you're not alone, but not like, here's the solution to your problem. I think that's very narcissistic to think that I would have the solution to somebody else's problem, uh, as if um, as if I'm that powerful, I guess.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, because I know in the book you mentioned having teenagers, and
Mm.
so do I. And I know for me, they help me get really clear on what I haven't worked on yet, or what's not been cleared out. And so that I can shift my story when I see that, oh, those aren't good messages, and because I've taught my kids not to blame, but also not to blame themselves, but to take accountability and responsibility, they will go, they will make sure that they catch me if for 1 second I say, "You're making me."
Mhm.
But it really does. I feel like kids are great helpers when it comes to helping us to rewrite our stories as they shift and as we grow.
Yeah, it's like a mirror into ourselves, right?
Yes.
I, ha- I somebody posed this question to me recently. Uh, what fight do you show up for? And the honest answer is I continue to show up to try and be a calm, patient parent to my teenagers. And what is curious to me is that so many people have done this for generations and survived, because I'm going to tell you, there in my life there's been no pain like that. And because all your fears, all your insecurities, all your buttons are pushed all at once. And so when you talk about tolerating pain, it's hearing feedback that you don't want to hear and not reacting, um, and being able to, like, okay, be a holding space. So allow that, because sometimes, by the way, the stuff that's being dumped on you is truth. Other times, it's residue from other interactions that just needs to be dumped, and it's taking it all in and then saying later, "I'm gonna go into my closet and sort it all out."
I know that feeling. Well, and like, I've had them come at me and talking about owning my story, owning the truths that they do present to me has been
Yeah,
big. And as teenagers, they've gotten better at showing me those. So, and I, like you, it's like strive and I work towards, but I am human and I see where, because I have PTSD. So if my nervous system goes and I go into my freeze or I go into my flight or fight, I see how it affects things. And so then it's about owning my story to them and saying, this is what happened within me of why I reacted, so that I am not taking it out on them.
Yeah. Yeah, it just takes a lot of strength, a lot we talk about grit, right? Like,
Yes.
just keep showing up, and and the 2 things I think with teenagers or kids in general gets you want to help them navigate the potholes that you stepped in,
Mhm.
but also realizing they have to do that because that's part of their growth, right? So, oh,
Yes.
yeah, it's a lot.
Yes, and I all our closest relationships, I feel like, are wonderful ways for us, opportunities actually, really, to own our stories, to see, because like you said earlier, it's the reflection, and the people in our lives tend to reflect what's really going on if we're brave enough to look at ourselves and go, ooh, this reaction, okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I really loved how you tell the stories in your book, because you can almost see people's reaction through your words. It was pretty impressive, I have to say.
I don't know how to respond to that. Thank you.
Because, well, and I mean, this is why I really hope that people who are watching this pick up your book, and it's because that the stories do help us not feel alone. They do help us see how each person has their story, but when we're open and willing, we don't have to be stuck in a story either. And that you made really clear, and I love that. Even though you don't always see the endings, you do always well, from what I read, I felt like I could always see the door opening so that people could at least see.
I think, as far as my goal in the book, and this is gets to owning my own story, which, by the way, I do include a lot of my own stories in the book. I shouldn't say a lot, several. But I'm an active participant in other people's stories too. So, but I think one of the things that got in the way of me owning my story is I I am okay with not always having a happy ending or this idealistic, fluffy ending that makes people feel good. And I wondered, gosh, would people like sloppy? And I think part of my own growth is realizing that authenticity resonates with people. It's okay to be real. It's okay to show your flaws. It's okay to show your mistakes. It's okay to show your vulnerabilities, um, because it helps other people feel less alone. And so I think that is probably the punchline to me owning my own stories is realizing I could be out there with it. And it's okay. It's my truth. Other people don't have to agree with everything, but that's okay.
And love that we're ending on that. We're ending Seeds of Wisdom on that note, but we are going to take it beyond the seed. So if you are listening or watching on any other thing but YouTube, you can go to YouTube to watch the extended version of this. But if this is all you needed to give you what you needed for the day, awesome. And thank you so much, Jodie, for joining us for this. So
Happy to be here.
now let's get into that. Let's get into the the roadblocks of owning our stories, and talk more about that, because I think that's such an important thing, is to see that it's messy. And that's the one thing I used to hate about certain self-help books, is I felt like they were up here and I was down here, and if I couldn't get to that place all the time, I was failing. And I didn't see the person, I didn't see the human, and it's part of the reason I appreciated your stories being in the book, because I know even with the titles that you do have, with, being a therapist, PhD, sometimes we as outsiders can go, they have all the answers and I'm back here, and if they really see my mess, you know, they'll see how, dangerous a person I am because I'm messy.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'll tell you this true story. So my kids would go to school, and on Thursdays, I would go straight from dropping them off to the grocery store. I don't know, some days I wouldn't comb my hair. I would have brushed my teeth, but nothing else. I mean, I looked completely disheveled, and I kept running into this same person who worked at the dentist's office. And finally, I said to her, she would always stop and say hello to me. And I finally said to her, I'm so embarrassed that every time I run into you, I look like I've slept on the street. And she said, that's what I love about you, that you are not pretentious. And I say that to myself a lot. And that's been a few years ago. But so when I find myself judging, and that's the roadblock, in one of the biggest roadblocks, in my opinion, is this shame and judgment. And for many people, it can go back to childhood, messages they were given, like, what are other people going to think? Uh, Having to live up to a certain standard. But then for folks like me, having an anxiety disorder, like that's baked in, constant questioning and doubting, etc. And just being able to, I can't make it go away, but just being able to detach from it. But we all have our challenges. I think you had mentioned to me earlier, folks who have addiction, sort of those challenges, or other people who are in abusive relationships. Uh, we all have our challenges that get in the way of owning our stories. But I think my where I'm going with this long dialogue or diatribe, I don't know, is that we have a lifetime to figure it out. Like, I think that there's also a sense we have to figure it out by a certain age, or how come we don't have our stuff together? But realizing like there's no expiration date until you're actually expired, right?
Hmm. Well, it's so funny because I say to one of my friends often, I'm like, I probably won't know that till after I die.
There you go. Mhm.
It's one of those things I probably won't know. It's like one of those questions that's like, if when I cross over, whatever happens to me, I can go ask somebody questions. That's going to be one of my questions. Because
Mhm.
there's certain things I know I'm not going to know, and that's okay. And I just leave it at that now. I used to obsess about it.
But
So,
that's humility, right?
yeah,
I mean, isn't it kind of dangerous to think that we've got it all figured out?
I agree. Well, and I realize one of the things that I've had to do in my life to not have a roadblock in my growth and my change is to understand that I'm going to keep learning things, and that might change what I believed yesterday. It might change what I believed a month ago. It might change how I was grown up, how I grew up, beliefs I grew up with. And so one of the things that I did for myself was trying to stop getting so impacted by groups of beliefs that I let them anger me, like that I let them make me lose my humanity, just having the belief. because that was something I was struggling with. I would get so mad if somebody believed differently about something that I lost my humanity to see the person in front of me.
Yeah, yeah. I I I think that is it, and just showing up to learn as much as you can, and always trying to have a learner's mind. But that's the philosophy behind mindfulness, or like meditation, mindfulness meditation. Like, what can I learn?
Well, and I've made plenty of mistakes in my life and I continue to make mistakes because I'm human. And I always try to remember, like, when I'm looking at someone else, would I want somebody to judge me for this one choice I made
Yeah.
where I don't know their background? I don't know how they were raised. I don't know any of those. I don't know any piece of that person's life except for one moment. And, because if I see something online or see something on social media, I just try to really watch my reactions to how other people's stories are weaved based on one event. And I feel like that, because that was a part of my roadblocks, is I remember I was watching so much like court TV forensic files at one point. I and I wrote about this in my book that I was upstairs, someone goes up to a dumpster, has gloves on in Florida, has gloves on, goes up to the dumpster and dumps something in the dumpster and then speeds off. And I'm like, he just threw away a murder weapon. Like, that's where the stories in my head got so jumbled from watching so many other people's like narratives and how things are spun, and I just could see that was like that clear moment where the stories we tell ourselves aren't always true.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
then, my dad investigated it and it was dog poop. He was throwing out dog poop.
The person really wanted to get rid of it, right?
Exactly. He didn't want it in his car.
Mhm.
Understandable.
Mm.
But yeah, so I feel like seeing through that lens of story helps me to see that I'm telling stories about other people's lives too when I judge them.
Well, yeah, and I would say to you, if you own your own story and own the messiness of it,
Mhm.
then you necessarily have to recognize that other people are messy too, and they have their own messy stories. So there's space for them all.
That to me, that's a lot of pressure off to know that.
Should be.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of pressure off when we know that piece. And in the book you have examples of different stories that of people telling themselves different stories. There is a story in your book about abuse, a woman who was abused. Do you mind me sharing a little bit about it?
Feel free.
um but that she didn't even know she was abused because the story she was telling herself about her life didn't include that she was abused. And then just from your conversations with her, she started that awareness. And then that's the key, right? Is the awareness to see, oh, wait, and then start opening the door to what that means once you see it.
Yeah, and I think in that particular situation, for me, the first thing is like, well, how could you not know that this is abuse? But then I have to recognize that and say, that's so judgmental, right? Different people have different life experiences, and it doesn't matter why the person didn't know. The fact is, I have an opportunity to provide some education that this is what abuse looks like. Yeah,
And that's such a good point too, because I know for me, one of the things I go to is I go, well, maybe they grew up with parents that acted like that. So if that's a sense of normal to them, they wouldn't know. And I try to create their story for them, whereas healthier for me would be to do what you just did and say, I have this to offer, and get me from like spinning more stories in my head and creating more mental clutter.
Yeah, well, I think that's sort of how the brain works. We want an explanation
Yeah.
because somehow we think if we understand with a definite explanation, we can somehow avoid future problems. And so I think that's again how the brain is wired, but we just have to recognize that it's going on and say, I'm going to step aside for a moment.
Yeah, I like that though, because at least I have another see talk about growth just in this moment. It gives me just another thing I can tell myself that helps not me get into the monkey brain because I do have OCD, so the obsessive compulsive storytelling. If I get stuck on a story, I am researching to death,
Yeah,
and I can go down those rabbit holes
yeah.
if I'm not careful. So thank you for that. You just helped me.
Yay.
So in the book, you also mention codependency.
Mhm.
And I know that for me, that was a roadblock that I didn't see, that I didn't know that my rescuer of wanting to save people and being attracted to people I could save was codependency. And I had read the book, you even mention it in your book, is Codependent No More, by Melody Beatty.
Like
And
the Bible.
yeah, that was like the eye open. I felt what it was like to be one of your patients when you're telling them that truth that they had no idea of before, because that's how I felt after I read that book. And I'm like, oh, I thought codependency was this, but really,
Yep.
because I was trying to get my worth from that other person, you know, that's codependency.
Yeah, and I tell folks that codependency, I think all of us have some, it's really help, a desire to help out of balance or out of control. And so it comes from a good place. And so most of us have some level of a desire to help. I mean, if we're good human beings living in a community, it's just for whatever reason, whether it be genetics or our family or not knowing when to stop. And we talked earlier about teenagers. That's my button. Like, because you tell yourself the stories like, well, if I don't, then these horrible things are going to happen and I have the power, so why would I not? Right? To step in and control. And again, if you have anxiety, like I have, the control is a lie, but it's a misguided attempt to reduce your anxiety by imposing a solution which may or may not be the solution, the good solution. So it's all, I guess, what I'm saying is codependency is that spiral and it takes a lot of work. And even if you know you have it, it doesn't mean it goes away. It's like going to the gym. You have to keep practicing and practicing and practicing. And if you quit going, you'll fall back to the way it used to be.
One of the things I recognize with my codependency is when I start like kind of like that martyr self-talk of I do so much and I'm not appreciated and da, 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 then I know I have let my boundaries like go off the rails because I was doing for someone else what they could do for themselves, or because I was trying to gain their love or gain, you know what I mean, for doing what I was doing instead of doing it because I wanted to do it or I felt responsibility to do it or whatever the reason. But that helped me to really see how if I became the victim of the story I was telling myself about what I was doing, it became that roadblock for me of
Yeah.
of not getting to see my story, because as soon as I put the blame on someone else, I stopped seeing my story, what my story was.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are triggers like in the environment. As you were talking, I found myself thinking, I, you were talking about the martyr stories. I'm like, yeah, I don't do that. And I was reflecting, what's weird is in an attempt to not be codependent. I tend to be a little bit maybe too aloof. Now, which is interesting because I am, as I describe in the book, like I am emotionally available, but it's in my head, right? So I've had in different scenarios, a couple of people have said to me they thought that maybe I was not emotional or not sensitive. And it's because I try so hard to not show anything.
Mhm.
And my son, my teenage son, in fact, said to me um, that he preferred to go to his dad because I didn't care enough. And because essentially he's wanting pity. He's wanting all, and I feel that, but I go exercise. Like, okay, I got to get out of it. I've got to go vent somewhere else because I'm afraid if I let that out, it's going to take control. Does
Yes.
that make sense? So
Oh
my
yeah.
boundaries are probably a little bit too my wall is too high sometimes. It's hard to manage.
Yeah. Well, and like we were talking about being vulnerable and being authentic, to hear somebody who has, just because we can have education in all these areas, the practice of things is totally different than knowing, and if we can't see it, if we're not willing to not to if we're not willing to be messy and see our mess, we're not going to make anything better, and a relationship can suffer because we're not willing to look at ourselves enough to go, okay, no, I'm allowed to be messy.
Mhm.
um with I put From a Loving Place is the name of, all my uh, platforms, the podcast, the Facebook. And so many people get that confused with positivity. And for
Mhm.
me, it's not about that. It's about looking at myself with love no matter what I'm doing, no matter what
Mhm.
I've been through, no matter what my experience is, to come at it from a loving place,
Mhm.
which is about accepting myself so that I'm a better person to accept other people.
Yeah, and isn't that a philosophy of parenting, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like
exactly.
parenting your being a healthy parent to yourself.
Yeah, and I'm a kid of trauma, so that I did have to do a lot of that inner child, looking back and taking care of that young version of me that had these different places where I didn't feel like my needs were being met. So I can, yeah, it's just all so important to our stories, and it's funny because you had so many different stories, yet I could feel like I could relate. What It didn't matter if it was to the person, the partner, that or whoever you were talking about. There was some form of relation because we all experience, feelings, and having experiences that bring up feelings that connect somehow.
I appreciate that. I and that's been some of the most helpful feedback. Well, I vetted this book with some people, and they said I saw myself in so many different stories, and that's why I chose the story. So I like to hear that. I it's the everyday.
Hmm. And again, I'm not usually playing books this much, but I just feel like it's so important to see the messy, and not see the ending, and not see like these perfectly tied up, okay, if this happened to me, this is how it's going to look at the end, or if this. And I personally appreciate that so much because it's going to look different based on each person's story, and it's going to look on what they're telling themselves, on the experiences they have, and what they tell themselves throughout each experience that comes up even after you have been in their lives.
Yeah, and we talked earlier about pain, right? So I have to tolerate the pain of not knowing the ending or not having that neat ending. But as we said before, life is always changing and it's not over until it's over.
I If I help somebody that it's like they come into my life for a moment and then they're gone. I always try to, if I'm meant to know the ending, I'll know it. If I'm not, I won't. Period. It's the only thing that keeps me sane
Yeah.
from that. the OCD part of my brain that goes, I want to know. I want to know the whole end. But
Well, and I try to say to myself, it's not about you.
yeah.
Like, because I'm trying to make it about me. Like, what is it? But
Hmm.
it's not about you. Like, get over yourself.
Yeah. I've had to say that to myself quite a few
I say that a lot.
times. Well, and I think it's it's for me, it's that shake off. It's like when ducks are shaking something off. It's that help to shake it off for me. It's,
Yeah, I and one of the other, I don't know if you would use this at all, but a professor said this to me one time, and it's just in my internal dialogue forever now. Who the hell do you think you are? So whenever I get high and mighty, or I think I know the answer, or I think I shouldn't make mistakes, so I've done something that used to be after I do podcasts, I would review it. I would watch and then, oh, why did you do this? And you act like this, and I can't believe you said that. And da, da. I'm like, who the hell do you think you are? Right? You're messy, just like everybody else. It's
yeah.
okay. Own it.
Yes. Well, it actually took me forever to start this podcast for that exact reason. I was so scared of being messy.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to be able to control everything, and knowing that I wasn't going to be able to do that, and that, yeah, it's been an acceptance of messiness, and I love it because it's helping me as a person grow, is
There's
accepting
the pain,
messiness.
right? The
Hmm.
tolerance of the pain.
Yep.
That's it.
And I and sometimes it's like we can't learn until we make the mistake. We can't learn because we can't see it until we make the mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And I always try to keep that in mind when I'm thinking of other people too, is that could be a great learning opportunity for them.
All information is valuable. It's
Yeah.
when we get into our heads and say, labeling, well, that wasn't valuable, but this was, and it's all valuable, all of it.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I have absolutely loved this conversation. I said even before we started this podcast, I could talk to you for hours. So, is there anything you would like to leave people with?
Yeah, actually, is if it's okay with you, I'm going to show
Absolutely.
you my book because they did such a fabulous job with designing it. Um, yeah, and I guess uh, I hope that people find healing there. But my what I would say to you is, we're all there together. We're all in it together. And if anything, I hope that we can assume good intentions in other people. And if everybody's doing that, there'll be a whole lot less judgment to go around.
Well, thank you so much, Jody. And please, if you're watching, know that if you're watching this, it's because you're meant to be here. So thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Make sure to follow the links that accompany this episode. You will learn a lot more about today's guest and see what they have going on now. You will also get all the links to follow them on their journeys if this seed resonates with you. Come back next week for another Seed of Wisdom. If you loved what you saw or listened to, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.